Carly Macy, would you please tell me, if you would, what was the state of Georgia's reaction to Chief Justice John Marshall's ruling on that Supreme Court decision? And so they just what? Yep, they ignored the ruling. What was President Jackson's reaction, Will?
His reaction, he believed in the power of the president. He said, let the state of Georgia deal with it.
Not the state of Georgia.
There.
I know.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Said Mr. Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it.
Right, he said that the Chief Justice made his decision, let him enforce it, which he knew would not be possible. Well, anyway, I told you that in 1835, some of the Cherokee leaders just had given up on the whole thing and agreed to accept Western land in exchange for being relocated in a positive manner. And this agreement between some of those Cherokee leaders became known as the Treaty of New Echota. And when that treaty was signed, other Cherokees, under the leadership of Chief John Ross, continued to resist to the bitter end. Now, we told you that the bitter end is going to result in the tragic Trail of Tears. So, even though John Ross resisted, he knew that he wasn't going to fight against the American military, so approximately 20,000 Cherokee Indians were marched westward at gunpoint by the American military. So Chief John Ross and approximately 20,000 Cherokee Indians, men, women, and children, were marched westward of the Mississippi River at gunpoint. So where are they marching from? Where are they located? Georgia. So they're in Georgia. That's a pretty good distance by foot, wouldn't you say, to get to the lands over here west of the Mississippi? And as a result of the tough journey, nearly 25% of the tribe perished on the way. Because when did they march them? Middle of the winter. So this sad march, in which 25% of approximately 20,000 Cherokee Indians perished in the middle of the winter, went down in American history as the Trail of Tears. Carly, you got your phone there kind of handy? I want you to Google, or whatever you do, the state flower of Georgia. Tell me what the state flower of Georgia is. You might be surprised when you hear it. State flower of Georgia. Anybody want to guess while she's looking? What kind of a flower is it? Oh, it's a good guess. That's a good guess. Orchid? No?
Indian paintbrush.
No. What? Rosa what? Lavagata. You know what that means? There it is. Hold it. It's called a Cherokee rose. That is the state flower of Georgia. I want you to take a look at this because according to Indian legend, the Cherokee rose, which is the state flower of Georgia, grew in every spot a tear fell on the Trail of Tears. So according to Indian legend, this flower right here, the Cherokee rose, which is the state flower of Georgia, grew where every tear was dropped along the famous Trail of Tears. Now, if you follow the famous Trail of Tears today, you would see the Cherokee rose growing all over that trail that led from Georgia to lands west of the Mississippi. And Indian legend states that the Cherokee rose grew where every single tear was shed on the Trail of Tears. Kind of a cool legend. Okay, we're going to have a writing assignment, which we're going to have due later. I'm just going to give it to you now. This is the Supreme Court ruling by John Marshall on this dispute between Georgia and the Cherokee Indians. What I'd like you to do, and I want it tomorrow, is I want you to read through this, and I want you to answer the questions. It's not an easy read. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat. So do the best you can. There are 2 questions at the end, and then we will cover this in detail once you answer the questions, and then we may let you resubmit if your opinion changes after that. Okay?
I think I give you one too many. Or somebody's got one too many. There we go, I think you got the right one.
Okay, so this is document 7-4, Justice John Marshall, Worcester versus Georgia, 1832. In the case Worcester versus Georgia, the U.S. Supreme Court had to determine whether the federal government could use its commerce powers to remove Native Americans from the southeastern United States. Chief Justice John Marshall, 1755 to 1835, wrote the majority opinion on that ruling. I want you to put that in your binder for now, and I want you to read that overnight and answer the two questions in the back. Number one, how does Marshall justify legal protection for the Cherokees? And number two, does the court's decision favor the expansion or reduction of Native American freedom within the United States? And take your position and briefly explain that. Okay? That's due tomorrow at the start of the period, so keep that in mind. We'll deal with that tomorrow in some detail. Okay? All right, that'll then take us away from the Native American part of this and move to the next subtopic, which is President Jackson's opposition to the Bank of the United States. We're going to get into some Jackson politics now. Okay, President Jackson's opposition to the Bank of the United States. Now, historians say that one of the most bitter fights during his presidency was against the Bank of the United States. Jackson did not at all like the Bank of the United States, and he attacked the bank stemmed from his own opinions of it. So he attacked the Bank of the United States stemmed on his own opinions of the bank. He did not like the bank, and we'll tell you why, and why his goal in life was to attack and destroy the Bank of the United States. One reason he attacked the Bank of the United States is he disliked and distrusted banks, especially that one. So he disliked and distrusted banks. Disliked and distrusted banks. Now, Chantel, I want to ask you a question. Most people that dislike or distrust something do so because they don't what? Why would he not trust or like a bank? You think he's put a lot of his money in banks? No, which means that maybe he distrusts them or dislikes them because he doesn't what? Or understand them. So that's the second reason why he attacked the Bank of the United States. Thanks, Nick. Is Jackson did not understand the banking system. A lot of people have views on things they don't like or they don't trust simply because they don't understand them. Maybe if they had a better understanding, they wouldn't feel that way, but that was not Jackson. He disliked and distrusted banks because he did not understand the banking system. And number three, Jackson saw the Bank of the United States as a, quote, money power. He saw the Bank of the United States as a, quote, money power. I want you to think about Jackson. I want you to think about what he stands for and tell me why, what does he mean, Megan, by he sees the Bank of the United States as a money power? And who are the type of people who put their money in banks? And very good. The money power is a monopoly, he believed, in which that the rich and powerful used it to their advantage. That's why he called the Bank of the United States a money power. He saw it as a monopoly. The majority of people that are putting their money in the Bank of the United States were what, Blaine? Wealthy people. And did he really like wealthy people? No. And he thought they were just using the Bank of the United States to their own advantage. Because the majority of the stockholders in the Bank of the United States were obviously wealthy people from where? The eastern seaboard. Okay? How many people do you think that lived west of the Appalachians owned stock in the Bank of the United States? 0%. Well, I don't know if it was zero, but it was not very many. So only maybe a handful of people in the United States that lived west of the Appalachians, which would make up your more common folk, had any stock in the Bank of the United States. So he also went as far as to accuse the Bank of the United States of lending money to who in exchange for political favors? Who was the only person that could give you political favors? Who are the politicians in our country? congressmen, senators, representatives. So he also went as far as to accuse the Bank of the United States of lending money to members of Congress in exchange for political favors. Because what does he believe in? Power of the presidency. Okay? So, he also viewed, just so you know, the Bank of the United States as unconstitutional. He thought its mere existence was unconstitutional. Now, what's going to come up that we talked about before? If you can remember, I'd be kind of impressed. What's going to come up concerning the Bank of the United States probably pretty soon? New lease. Very good. New lease. This group is good. So, about the time Jackson started to assault the Bank of the United States, the bank had applied to renew its lease. Every 4 years they had to renew the lease of the Bank of the United States. And who was the one that approved the lease? No? Congress. So the lease was applied for, and it was taken to Congress for approval. And in the summer of 1832, both houses of Congress approved the lease. So again, the lease was taken to Congress in the summer of 1832, and both houses of Congress approved the lease, which means both houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate, both approved the lease. Well, what happens sometimes when Congress passes something that the president doesn't particularly like? He vetoes it, and that's exactly what Jackson did. He immediately vetoed this bill to give a new lease to the Bank of the United States. Now, what's coming up in 1832? New election. And this Bank of the United States, whether it should exist or not, is going to be a huge political issue or a campaign issue in this election. So, because of this veto by President Jackson of the bill that was going to give a new lease to the Bank of the United States, the Bank of the United States becomes a major issue in this upcoming election of 1832, which is our next subtopic. Now, I went back and told you to write an essay on the election of 1824, but what was established in 1828 concerning political parties? Anybody remember? Democratic Republicans and National Republicans, or Democrats and Republicans, so keep that in mind. Now, who do you think in this election of 1832 that the National Republicans are going to nominate for the presidency? Now, you might say Martin Van Buren because it's on the ID sheet, but he was a member of the other party. So think back on who we talked about. Who might be the candidate? John C. I would have said Will if that was true. John, good guess, but not right. Henry Clay. Henry Clay becomes the National Republican candidate for the presidency. You know, you're going to hear about a guy next year by the name of Adlai Stevenson, who was a tremendous politician from the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, goes down in history as known as a two-time loser. He lost to Eisenhower in 1952 and 1956, but he was a good person. He would have been a good president. Henry Clay is kind of the same way. He was a good politician. He'd been a good president, but kept losing. He's the Buffalo Bills of politics. You know, 4 Super Bowls, 4 losses. All right, I could have got you on that, and I did. But anyway, during the now does Clay campaign? Hey, does Clay? Well, lost 2. Does Clay campaign? Is he going to campaign for or against the Bank of the United States? For. Very good. Absolutely, he's going to campaign in favor. Now, who's without doubt going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party? Jackson. He's going to run for re-election, no doubt, and he obviously is going to vigorously campaign against the Bank of the United States. So when the people speak, you're going to get a pretty good idea in this election which way they want to go. Now, Jackson wins the election, not much problem, and Martin Van Buren of New York is elected vice president under Jackson. And Martin Van Buren of New York is going to be elected vice president under Jackson. So Clay and the Republican Party suffer a huge defeat, and it's going to lead to our next subtopic, which is what? Destroying the Bank of the United States.
Where is Van Buren?
New York. Yep. You ever read?
I thought, so is the now the Democratic Party's
The Democrats.
Okay.
But we're just gonna, oh, yeah, I just did that to get your mind back. Now it's gonna be Democrats and Republicans.
Okay,
No.
because Jackson was.
A Democratic Republican, now he's gonna be, remember, he changed that. So now, we're Federalists are history, right? So we have Democrats and Republicans, although I said Democratic Republicans and National Republicans, just keep you in mind. So here we go. Now, the point being is that Clay and the Republican Party suffer a crushing defeat, which is gonna lead to our next subtopic, which is destroying the Bank of the United States.
Okay, never mind, what? What did you just say?
I said Clay and the Republican Party, they,
Suffered a defeat?
it's crushing defeat.
Okay, whatever, just go.
Which leads us to our next subtopic, okay? Which is destroying the Bank of the United States. Now, once Jackson was reelected, his main goal was to destroy the Bank of the United States, no question about it. And what he did to destroy the National Bank of the United States is he slowly withdrew all federal funds from the Bank of the United States. He took out the federal government's money. Now, were there other monies in that bank besides federal government money?
Yeah.
Sure, a lot of rich people had money in there, but the federal government had a ton of money in that bank. So he began to slowly withdraw that money, and then he deposited them in certain state banks. So he took all the money out of the Federal National Bank of the United States, he took the federal money out, and he deposited it into smaller state banks that evidently were in favor of him, right? You think he's going to put that money in banks that he wasn't in favor of? He doesn't like banks or trust them, but he's got some allies. And so he takes out these federal funds out of the Bank of the United States and he puts them in certain state banks. Now, what did they call those, the people that were against Jackson doing this? What did they call these state banks? Pet banks, okay? They were Jackson's pet. And all of these banks were very loyal to President Jackson. So to destroy the Bank of the United States, he simply starts withdrawing all federal funds from the bank and starts putting them in these certain state banks that were loyal to him, known as pet banks to those that opposed Jackson. Well, what happens to these banks, to this bank? What's that? Okay, and so what do you think Congress does when they're asked to act on that bill again to renew the lease once it was vetoed? They act on it again. What do? They didn't pass it. So after Jackson's actions, the Bank of the United States was not able to function, and after the 4-year lease for the Bank of the United States ended, it was not renewed by Congress, and as a result of that, the Bank of the United States officially closed in 1836. 1836. Okay, that'll take us, as we're moving on quickly here, to the election of 1836 and the end of the Jacksonian era.
Wait, what year did it close?
1836. And that will take us to the new subtopic, which is the election of 1836 and the end of the Jacksonian era.
So it's closing the National Bank did.
Well, I think Jackson thought it was great.
Yeah, but what?
But they're.
Well, let's continue on here. Okay, in January of 1835, President Jackson decided he would visit the Capitol. Well, while he was visiting the Capitol, a deranged house painter by the name of Richard Lawrence approached the president, pointed his pistol at him, and fired.
House painter?
House painter, this guy paints houses.
Oh, why was he?
If I said painter, you might think he was an artist, okay? So in January of 1835, President Jackson was visiting the Capitol, and as he was visiting the Capitol, a deranged house painter, or person that paints houses, by the name of Richard Lawrence, approached President Jackson, pointed his pistol directly at him, and fired. Fortunately for President Jackson, what are we talking about here? Fortunately for President Jackson, the pistol misfired. But Lawrence grabbed his other pistol, pointed it directly at Jackson, and fired it.
which also misfired. This is a true story. So Richard Lawrence approaches President Jackson. He points a pistol at him, point blank range, fires, it misfires, takes out his other pistol in his other hand, points it at President Jackson, fires, and it misfired. Jackson, you got to remember Jackson, he was so angry that he went after Lawrence with his cane. And he was after him so hard that members of his staff had to restrain him from going after and beating the hell out of Lawrence. That's the way he was. A little older in his age. He was so upset about this guy trying to kill him that he went after the assassin, or attempted assassin, with his cane and had to be restrained by members of his presidential staff. Now, this had a little bit of effect on Jackson because after this incident, he began to wonder if he should take another run at the presidency. Could he have done that, been elected to a third term? Yes. And many Americans and historians will tell you that probably Jackson might have been president for life if he wanted to. He was that popular with the common people. He probably could have ran until he died in office and been fine. Well, after this incident and some thinking and some soul searching, Jackson made it clear that he was ready to retire, and he announced that he would not run for a third term. So Jackson contemplates his future, takes this assassination attempt maybe into consideration some, does some soul searching, and makes the announcement publicly that he will not seek a third term. So who do you think the Democratic Party nominated for president? Martin Van Buren, with Richard M. Johnson as his vice president. Okay, so the Democrats nominate Vice President Martin Van Buren for the presidency, and then they tab Richard M. Johnson as his vice presidential candidate or nominee.